Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Bernard Prusak, and I'm the director of the McGowan Center for Ethics and Social Responsibility at King's College, which is a small liberal arts college in northeastern Pennsylvania. And thank you for joining us. You'll hear a little bit more about King's in just a minute. The McGowan Center is the host of this evening's event and also co-sponsor. But my role is largely ceremonial, so it's to welcome you. Thank you for joining us. And I have the privilege of doing two other introductions as well. My first is to introduce Bob Wolensky. He's Professor Emeritus of Sociology at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and Adjunct Professor of History here at King's. His books include The Knox Mine Disaster, The Final Years of the Northern Anthracite Industry, and the Effort to Rebuild a Regional Economy from 2016, and just recently from Penn State University Press, Sewn in Coal Country, a study of the ladies' garment industry during the decline of Pennsylvania's anthracite coal industry in the second half of the 20th century. Bob is the principal organizer of this evening's event. He does so much for the Anthracite Heritage Foundation, and that foundation is the other co-sponsor. And he also is the organizer of many of the events that make up Anthracite Heritage Month, which we're celebrating now. Northeastern Pennsylvania, I should note, is richer for Bob's interest in our history. So Bob, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. As a native of Pennsylvania's northeastern region, I'm very happy to do this. I'm here to just simply quickly welcome you on behalf of Anthracite Mining Heritage Month. This Heritage Month has been going on for 10 years. It began in a smaller form in 1999, which was the 40th anniversary of the Knox mine disaster, the last major mining disaster in our region. But it evolved from the Knox mine disaster to Mining History Week to Mining History Month over the past 10 years. And the Curran lecture, the Monsignor John Joseph Curran lecture, has been a keystone in this month's activities. And we're very delighted this year to have Philip Jenkins here to talk to us about an important topic in our history. We used to be only anthracite mining, but we broadened it 10 years ago to be anthracite heritage, which includes a lot of different topics, ethnicity. We did baseball a few years ago at the Luzerne County Community College, because this region has 5 or 6 players in Cooperstown in the Hall of Fame. We've done a variety of other topics that are not necessarily tied to mining. So this is one of them. It's sort of tied to mining, but not exactly. It's our heritage. I want to mention that this year has not been good. We had 16 sessions scheduled this month. Many have been canceled. Some have moved to Zoom, like this one. Some will take place. One will take place on Saturday, the 22nd of January at the Anthracite Heritage Museum. Sue Hand, who is one of our region's premier artists, her exhibit is going to open up there on regional coal breaker communities. Sue has done so much artwork, and if you go to the King's College building on the square, now known as the Duck Alley building, in the foyer there, Sue's exhibit, The Anthracite Miners and Their Hallowed Ground, is on display. She has exhibited at LCCC and at King's and other places around here. Well, her exhibit opens this coming Saturday, and she'll speak about it up in Scranton starting at 2 o'clock. It'll also be on Zoom. Okay, also on Sunday, we have the annual Knox Mine Disaster Memorial Mass at St. John the Evangelist Church in Pittston, since the disaster happened near Pittston. And it is the trigger for this month that we now commemorate. There'll be other activities on Sunday, such as a public commemoration at the historical marker in front of Beloga Funeral Home. That's kind of those are the two upcoming events. The other two remaining are January 25th. The Luzerne County Historical Society will do a Zoom program on doing research on anthracite history, on the multidimensional anthracite history aspects, and it'll be on Zoom. There'll be 4 speakers. This is organized by Mark Rossetti, who is the Director of Operations at the Luzerne County Historical Society. If you want to do research on any aspect of anthracite history, there are 4 speakers that day, that evening, who will talk about this. It takes place at 7 p.m. on the 25th. And finally, the Lackawanna Historical Society is doing a program on the 30th, which relates to this evening's program, because there's going to be a live theatrical performance. It's live and it's also streamed on Father, I should say Monsignor John J. Curran, who is the labor priest. Curran is the fellow who in 1902 helped settle the infamous and famous strike of 1902 in cooperation with President Teddy Roosevelt and United Mine Workers Association leader John Mitchell. Monsignor Curran was a stalwart for the miners in the tradition of Pope Leo XIII's encyclical on Rerum Novarum, which was all about the working class, in which Leo XIII said working class people like coal miners need labor unions to deal with the incredible concentrated power of the big companies. And Curran was in that tradition, encouraged by Bishop O'Reilly at that time. And he did that for 30 years. Curran was really the mine workers' priest. And so this is why we have this lecture tonight, why we established it 10 years ago, to commemorate the mine workers and one of their advocates, Curran, and other advocates that they've had over the years, like John Mitchell. So a few programs working still. This is a live play. It's a play written by K.K. Gordon. It's also going to be streamed. If you want to see this play live, go to the Lackawanna Historical Society's website. If you want to watch it streamed, go to that same website and you can watch it over the air. As a matter of fact, we did this play for the Curran lecture 5 years ago. We did For the Least of Them is the 1-act play about the life of Monsignor John J. Curran, as right there in the Burke Auditorium, and it was a tremendous success and a very moving play. It's back. This time it's in Scranton at the Lackawanna Historical Society, if you should want to see it. Well, without further ado, after my going through what's left of Anthracite Mining Heritage Month, thank you for coming, and I will turn it back to Bernard.
Thanks, Bob, and thank you so much for all your work. So we're grateful to have with us the president of King's College, the 10th president, Father Tom Looney, who will give you a proper greeting this evening.
Well, thank you, Bernard. It's a great privilege to welcome all of you virtually to the King's College campus for the annual Monsignor John J. Curran Lecture, and to celebrate the great work of our own McGowan Center for Ethics and Social Responsibility that Bernard Prusak heads, and the great work that Bob does in the Anthracite Heritage Foundation. We're so grateful to both of you for the great work that you do. Many of you may know that King's was founded for the sons of coal miners in collaboration with the Diocese of Scranton and the Congregation of Holy Cross. And so we are deeply honored here at King's that the Miners Memorial Wall and that Sue Hand's phenomenal artwork adorns our campus. And we're also honored that the main altar in the Chapel of Christ the King, originally sculpted out of a single block of anthracite coal by a local artist, Edgar Patience, is the altar of sacrifice, what we name it in the Catholic tradition. And that notion of the altar of sacrifice is so meaningful for us because the coal miners of our region sacrifice so much, some even to the point of giving their own lives, many others losing their very childhoods by working in the mines themselves. And so we are so honored to host this lecture in honor of Monsignor John J. Curran, who himself, as a child, labored in the mines. And he never forgot the imprint of its hardship on his life. And so he became so moved to advocate for the rights of miners. He was no ordinary parish priest in the Catholic tradition. He took seriously the gospel message of caring for the poor and the marginalized, and he gave his life over to that. The title Monsignor, which is an honorary one in the Catholic tradition, was only bestowed upon him late in his life, which in some ways is a minor tragedy. It should have been given to him so much sooner for the great advocacy that he gave. And so at King's, we are so proud of our heritage and being founded to serve the children of coal miners. Today, for us in King's and the Congregation of Holy Cross, it's a special day. It's the feast day of the founder of our religious congregation, Blessed Basil Moreau. And Blessed Moreau believed that education was a work of resurrection, and education should bring people the possibility of new life and using their gifts in a different way. And King's was founded for the sons of coal miners so that they could have new life, so that they wouldn't have to go into the bowels of the earth and the mines and the darkness, but could live somehow in the light of day. And so we're so proud of our heritage. We're proud of this wonderful lecture series, and welcome to King's College.
Well, thank you, Father Tom, and thank you all for being here this evening. It's a privilege and an honor as a labor historian to welcome Philip Jenkins this evening. I'm just going to say a word about Philip and then turn it over to him for his presentation. Philip was educated at Cambridge University and for many years taught at Penn State. He is presently Distinguished Professor of History at Baylor University, where his main appointment is in the Institute for Studies of Religion, ISR. He has published 30 books, which have been translated into 16 languages. These include Hoods and Shirts, The Extreme Right in Pennsylvania, 1925 to 1950, and The Cold War at Home, The Red Scare in Pennsylvania, 1945 to 1960, both published by the University of North Carolina Press. His most recent book is Climate, Catastrophe, and Faith, How Changes in Climate Drive Religious Upheaval. The Economist magazine has called him one of America's best scholars of religion. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here, even virtually, and I'm very sorry I can't be on the beautiful campus. I'm talking tonight on the subject of, let me get my slides here. The Ku Klux Klan and the far right in the anthracite region. And initially, you may think of, well, the Ku Klux Klan, you may have certain associations with that, which are Southern, and you think, what on earth would this have to have with the anthracite region? And what I'm going to try and show is that studying the Klan provides a wonderful way of looking into what Walensky described not just as anthracite heritage, but as culture, as ethnicity, and religion in the region. And there is so much more to the story than you might expect. I just want to begin with a very ordinary story, which happened in 1924. It tells the story of a Mrs. Zimmerman, who was watching a parade near Tower City in Schuylkill County. And she stepped in a pothole and she slipped and broke her leg. Unfortunately, there was a doctor nearby and he took her back to her house and was able to treat her. What does this have to do with my story? Because the parade that she was watching was of several hundred Klansmen in full regalia parading through this area of Tower City. But without the story of her broken leg, we would know nothing about that incident, because at the time in the 1920s, it was so commonplace. It was a dog bites man story that you absolutely had no need to report. And that's rather counterintuitive, but as you get into the story in the region, and this is a story that, again, Bob Walensky will know very well. This is a Ku Klux Klan parade in Scranton in 1926. We can say very little about the particular event, except to say, look how many people we just see in this casual picture. There are certainly hundreds. And this is long past the point at which the Klan was at its height in this region. If you talk to older people about this era, well, obviously these days we're relying on oral history accounts. For decades and decades afterwards, people used to recall watching Klan parades, or very frequently, someone would say, "Have you heard what's happening on the mountain? The Klan are burning a cross." And depending on who you were, that might be a remarkable story, a striking story. If you were certain people, it would be a grossly terrifying story. So the Klan was here as a presence. I wrote a book, as was remarked, called Hoods and Shirts. And when I published it, I was very interested in the response. I had all these people who were absolutely ordinary people in Pennsylvania. I was teaching at Penn State at the time. And they came to me and said, "Well, you've actually, can you help me with this? When we cleared out my grandfather's belongings some years ago, we found Klan robes. And this was in some small town in Pennsylvania. We couldn't work out what on earth was happening." I heard that story again and again. We think of the Klan, we think South, and we think of racism, segregation, Jim Crow. There's another side to the story. So let me start very basically and talk about where the Klan came from initially. The first Klan begins in the American South during Reconstruction, right after the Civil War. It was a white former Confederate resistance to Black advances during Reconstruction. And when people had get together in a secret society, they drew on a number of traditions. A lot of them drew on their old college fraternities, which is where a lot of the Greek and the classical language comes from. So they were part of a cycle, a ring, a Ku Klux. And they also, like many people in the Old South, read a terrific amount of that great Scottish novelist, Sir Walter Scott. And they borrowed from his mythology. And if you ever read his stories about Scotland in the Middle Ages, then you would have these great clan chiefs, and they would send out a burning cross to summon their soldiers to go to war for the clan chief. So you had a Ku Klux and you had a clan. By about 1870, you had a Ku Klux Klan, which was absolutely, incontestably, a terrorist organization directed against Black Americans and their rights. It dissolved in the early 1870s because it achieved many of its goals in defeating Reconstruction. And it went away. It was a historical event. Fast forward now to 1915, when there was a movie by D.W. Griffith called Birth of the Nation, which was one of the greatest films ever made to that point, one of the most ambitious. It was about Reconstruction, and it made heroes of the Ku Klux Klan as the men who saved the South. The film gave rise to a real movement founded in 1915. So much of what they did was drawing on fiction, was drawing on myth. In other words, art shaped reality. And after the First World War, that movement went nationwide to just a staggering degree. Several things are happening. First of all, you have, this is the great age of joining. People join fraternities, they join clubs, they join the Masonic orders, the fraternal orders. And so it's part of that story. There's also a big move in what we today would call franchising, merchandising. People are commercially very sophisticated. And a lot of the spread of the Klan is a commercial enterprise. For example, if I'm a recruiter and I recruit you to the Klan, you pay quite a generous initiation fee, which goes to my superior. I keep some. You spend a lot of money on robes and rings and regalia and all sorts of stuff, and I keep a share of it. You then, now I've recruited you, you can do the same thing. It's almost a Ponzi scheme. Like I say, it draws on a lot of Masonic ideas. I'm not trying here to say bad things about the Masons, except their example influences so many of the fraternal orders. If you're a Klansman, you learn so many special names and passwords that separate you from the ordinary crowd. You learn a whole secret language. If I meet you, I might say Ayak, which means, are you a Klansman? And your response would be Akaya, a Klansman I am. And that sense of being part of a closed brotherhood, indeed, an alternative empire or nation, was a very powerful, very attractive idea for ordinary people at a time of enormous stress. We're looking at 1919, 1920. From about 1922, the Klan enters a period of a sensational boom, which is very difficult to imagine these days. If you go to any major American city, there are these parades, and they speak to the politics of the time. If you think of it, the great age of immigration to the United States before our present era is from 1890 to 1924, and I emphasize that last date. From 1920 to 24, there is a furious opposition to immigration in the United States, and that is one of the key forces driving the Klan. So let me just talk a little bit about the ideology. Of course, the Klan hates African Americans, wants to keep them in their place, promotes white supremacy. And that is the driving force in southern states. But in northern states like Pennsylvania, which is where so much of the action happens, so much of the growth happens, that Black racial issue is only a small part, a marginal part of the story. In the 20s, when the Klan was at its absolute height, it is primarily an anti-Catholic organization. Jews are there as a factor, but if you're in the anthracite country, it is a Protestant secret society, militia, if you like, directed against suppressing Catholics, defeating Catholic migration, and also defeating Catholic advances across society. If you look at a lot of the Klan's issues, they're not what we might expect. What does the Klan believe? Firstly, the absolute enforcement of prohibition. Alcohol has become such a symbolic badge between Protestants and Catholics. Fanatical support, interestingly, for public education. And you think, well, that's not particularly, if you like, a right-wing, a conservative issue in later years. It is then, because the thought is there are two choices. There is public education, or there is Catholic education and the Catholic schools. We will do anything, they will say, to fight Catholic education. A word about numbers. Many, many people join the Klan, and a great many of them do it for a short time. They join, they shell out their money for the robes and the rings and the special Klan revolvers with a coat of arms on, and you spend all this money. And after a while, you get bored, you go to a couple of meetings, maybe you don't like it, and you drop out. A lot of people who are in the Klan are in it for a month or two. A lot more are maybe in for a couple of years. It's very hard to look at the strength at any time. Nationwide, at its height by about 1924, the Klan has about 5 million members, and that's out of a much smaller total US population than we have today. If you have a relative in Pennsylvania who was in the 1920s and was a white Protestant, the odds are quite high that they would have had some contact with the Klan at some point. The working number I have found, and I'll talk about this resource in a moment, is that the number of people who passed through the Klan in Pennsylvania between about 22 and 25 was around 250,000. Now, if that seems high to you, let me make a point. That's the number that Klan authorities in Pennsylvania are reporting back to headquarters in Atlanta. And so the obvious question you might have is, surely they're exaggerating, they're trying to make themselves look important, they're padding the numbers. In fact, they've got a very strong vested interest in underplaying the numbers, because the more people there are, the more taxes or dues they have to send to Atlanta. And Atlanta gets back to Pennsylvania on this and says, look, we don't believe these figures. We don't believe you've just got 250,000 members. Just look at the cities, look at the activity, look at all these great parades. What's the real number? So I would suggest to you the 250,000 is not a padded figure. Sorry, pardon me. I would suggest to you it is a minimum number. So where is the Klan? And what I've tried to do, this is a little bit crude, but bear with me. Klan lodges are called clavans. I'll explain that in a second. The Klan developed this whole language, which is sometimes meant to be scary. So you have an imperial wizard, a grand dragon, you have mighty titans, you have caliphs, and all the way down to regular members of each individual lodge. Everything they can possibly do, they will start with K. So their lodges are clavans. By the way, they have great fun in Pennsylvania. So Crawford County becomes with K, Crawford, K County, and so on. There are 423 clavans or lodges established in Pennsylvania. Where are they? There is one county where there are over 30 clavans, and it is Allegheny. Overwhelmingly, the great center of the Klan in Pennsylvania is in the greater Pittsburgh area, with a subsidiary base in Philadelphia. And I'll say more about others. But look, where are the real centers? Allegheny County, Westmoreland County, Philadelphia. And then you look at the counties with between 10 and 20 clavans. Armstrong, Clearfield, Fayette, Indiana, Washington, very much, the western areas dependent on Pittsburgh rail and coal and steel. And then in this elite family, you find Luzerne and Schuylkill. Luzerne and Schuylkill, between them, have got 24 clavans. I'm going to kind of oversimplify here. I would argue that at their height, between 22 and 25, 26, thereabouts, there are between 50 and 60 clavans in the anthracite country. And I would suggest to you that in the whole anthracite region, you might at different times have as many as 40,000 people passing through Klan membership at one point or other. They're not all there at the same time, but there are a lot. You might notice I'm being a little bit cheery about using the word Klansman. There's a reason for that. A great many Klan members were women, and and in response to that, the Klan did something in the early 20s, which sounds very, very progressive. You find many documents which use a phrase that we would think belong to the modern day. They don't talk about Klansmen. They talk about Klanspersons to account for the number of men and women in the organization. It's hard to exaggerate just how much the Klan becomes part of life, part of celebration at this time. Particularly for working class areas. And when you have a great holiday, and by the way, everything in the Klan is related to patriotic holidays like Independence Day. Independence Day is the great Klan celebration. One event I write about, for example, I think in 1924, at Huntingdon in central PA, you have 10,000 clan members, 10,000 clanspersons gathering at one great event. They sell 22,000 dinner tickets. So this is a really serious major event. And they boast about the number of naturalizations that they perform. Let me explain that. What does naturalization mean? You are naturalized when you join a new country, right? When you joined the Ku Klux Klan, you became a citizen of the invisible empire, and you had to go through a naturalization ceremony. And you will read about events like this at this time where they might naturalize, that is, initiate maybe 1,000 people in a night. The scale of activity is amazing, and it's rather hard to think of a parallel. Oh, wait, I will give you one parallel that very few people ever draw, but it is important. Back in the 1890s, there was what we might call a proto-clan called the American Protective Association, which was a series of secret societies designed to protect America from imminent Catholic takeover. And that was, in a sense, the first draft of the Klan, and that claimed millions of members. It was the largest popular organization in 19th century America by far. And there's a lot of continuity from that to the Klan. But I keep coming back to this. It is anti-Catholic before it is anything. What I tried to do here, as I always say, there will not be a written test here. I tried to look at what the largest Klan lodges were. And this is 1925-26. This is after the peak. And I tried to indicate where the largest lodges were. And this particular slide illustrates the people in the West and the Southwest. And the first entry you come up against, it should give you pause. In Altoona, Pennsylvania, there was one lodge, one clavern, that had 2,800 members at one given time. We don't know how many people had passed through the clavern over the time. It was obviously more than that. But if you did a snapshot of membership at that point, they had 2,800 clanspersons. And in fact, at that point, Altoona had the largest Klan membership of any city in the United States, not just in Pennsylvania, not just the North, any city of the United States. And you can find so much about who these people were. They were heavily concentrated in particular industries, above all rail, steel, coal, heavy industry, canals, some. But the big driving factor was ethnicity. These were people of Welsh descent, English descent, Scotch-Irish descent, German descent. And you get the sense here, and this is pretty much true through Blair County, Cambria County, and of course the greater Pittsburgh area. Allegheny, for instance, has got 7 of these mega lodges with roughly about 1,000 members per clavern. This is remarkable. Well, let me talk about what I'm meant to be talking about, and that's the anthracite country. After the Southwest, after the Pittsburgh area, the other key center of the Klan in Pennsylvania was the anthracite country. And very much the same as I described, it is coal above all. You'll also find railways, and what you'll very often find if you look at Klan membership, and as I'll explain in a moment, you can find a lot out about that. If you imagine a particular workplace, it is very heavily stratified by ethnicity and religion. The Protestants are here. The Catholics are here. That division is reflected in status, in pay, in aspirations. Where are the largest lodges of these whatever it is, 50 or 60 clavins in the anthracite country. Well, here are the three champions. One in Lackawanna County, number 319, which in 1925-26 had 750 members, based at Carbondale. Two in Luzerne County, one at Kingston, one at Wilkes-Barre, both with around 900 members. Now, I just ask you to think about this. Think what the populations of these towns would have been at that point. Think what the Protestant adult population of those towns would have been at that point. And look at what a very high proportion of that population would be represented in the Klan. If ever you read that the Klan, particularly in this era, was for marginal people, losers, those people who'd failed in regular life, these are, if you like, desperate basket cases of society, absolutely not. These are extremely mainstream people. They are, by the standards of the day, extremely respectable working class, lower middle class. And there are, as I say, many different subgroups you will find. One thing you will find if you look in the Klan membership is a striking number of Protestant clergy. Every one of these clavins has to have a chaplain. Virtually always that is drawn from a local Protestant cleric. And which clerics it is, it tends to be the church that the local working class and lower middle class attends. And I don't want to, if you like, pick on any one denomination here. The Episcopalians and Presbyterians tended to see themselves as too respectable to deal with this Klan stuff, but a great many Protestant denominations were involved. In State College, where I was based for a great many years, I had the interesting time of tracking down the local Klan lodge and its head. And its head was the pastor of one of the leading German congregations. And that church suddenly, over time, passed through a number of transitions and is now in the hands of an African-American congregation. So don't let anyone ever tell you that God does not have a sense of humor. But you'll find a great many clergy involved in these different groups. Within the anthracite country, I just made a note of a couple of the longer-lived lodges, the ones that carry on year after year. And they're not necessarily all the larger. Some of them are 311 Rescue, which is the one based in Wilkes-Barre. It is there forever. It is there when they're founded in 22. It certainly goes on into the Second World War, and I don't know how long after that. It's a very interesting bunch. These were some of the other enduring ones. 236 in Schuylkill Haven. These have names, and this is a little bit unusual because normally when they name a clavin, they give it a very patriotic name. So it might be, for example, Ben Franklin. So they would pick a patriotic name for that. These are not particularly in that category. They're more geographical, like Topihocken, West Side. These are exactly, by the way, the same sort of names that you would get of the lodges of various fraternal organizations at this time. And you know so many of these, from the Oddfellows to the Knights of Pythias, Patriotic Order, Sons of America, and so on. These are the lodges, the clavins that are directed by very experienced people, and they tend to last. I particularly draw attention, by the way, to Pottsville. If you are interested in anthracite heritage and anthracite culture, it's very hard to avoid the novels of John O'Hara, who writes in a very thinly disguised Pottsville. And if you ever read, for instance, Appointment in Samara in his 1934 novel, he certainly makes reference to the Klan in the Pottsville area at that point. So I'm trying to go. Where are we? There we go. As I say, by the mid-20s, you have these mass demonstrations. This is just one absolutely typical one. This is from 44th and throng Wyoming Avenue to view Klan procession. The Klan became a sensation. You know, don't forget, people are just getting radio at this point. They don't have television. Cinema is very big. But if you want spectacle, the Klan is very good at delivering it. They're offering this kind of pageantry, just like extremist movements in contemporary Europe. They're very good at gathering a crowd. A couple of things, and this is a Klan meeting in Pike County. You think what the population of Pike County would be at this point. The Klan rapidly develops a network of halls for its activities, of businesses. As you'll see, I'm very loose on the trigger finger in terms of my PowerPoint here. A couple of things I want to talk about. One is Klans women. Such an important topic, and to understand the Klan, I want to look particularly at one event that happened in 1919, and that is the arrival and enforcement of Prohibition. I've already described that as being a symbolic victory of Protestant America over Catholic America. It also marks a high point in women's aspirations to reform society, create new ideas of what they call Christian manhood, Christian womanhood, and the Klan takes this up very vocally. You know, I have actually read people talk about what led them into the Klan at this era, and so much of it is it expresses what sound like noble aspirations. It's not a case of hatred. It's not a case of white supremacy. It's the language of Christian manhood, Christian womanhood, creating a world where there isn't alcohol, where there isn't domestic violence, which is one of the Klan's big issues, where women can enthusiastically support a movement like this, and a great many of them do. The Klan, it's not predominantly a women's movement, but the women play an awfully important part in it. So much of what the Klan does, you know, you think of the horrors associated with the movement, you think of the violence, and you look at their internal papers, and they present themselves basically, their central event is the basket picnic or the ham supper. They offer a terrific social life for communities where this really is not particularly operative. This is absolutely a typical one. This is from the, I suppose, the tip of Dauphin County, just on the edge of the anthracite country. You'll notice all these flyers, all this coverage is entirely open. This is not surreptitious. Depending on where you are, you're not going to get counter-protesters. You're not going to get the police out to suppress you. So what happens when there are Klan speakers? There's a big naturalization. There's fireworks, and you'll notice the emphasis here: Klansmen, Klanswomen and families, and all native-born, white, Protestant, Gentile American citizens and families are invited. And really that says it all. And today, when we look at the Klan, we focus on the black and white issue. In Pennsylvania, no, they are concerned with immigration, hence the native born, Gentile, yes, and Protestant, and that's their market. And these are some of those Klan's women. Just how public this is sort of remarkable. This is a tombstone from not far from Tower City in Schuylkill. It is a story of a young man who was a German farmer. He fought in the First World War. He then died in a car crash. He was buried, and there's a very expensive tombstone here. And you'll see his memberships in the stone. The Masons, obviously. The FCB is for Knights of Pythias, and right in the middle, Ku Klux Klan. And that's how it was regarded at that point for a few years. And then things went very, very bad very quickly. This is a militant Protestant movement. It is campaigning against Catholics. They campaigned in extremely sensitive areas, and they tried marching through Catholic areas to express their hatred of Catholicism. And if you think this will not end well, you would be absolutely correct. And in a number of places around Pennsylvania, there was fighting. There were riots. People were killed at Lilly and Scottdale and a number of other places. And by the time you get to 1925 and 1926, a couple of things are happening. When you see the Klan in the newspapers in Pennsylvania, it's not in the context of a ham supper. It's not in the context of fireworks. It's in the context of riot and mayhem and murder. Oh, and something else is happening. The Klan, particularly elsewhere in the country, is having terrible, terrible scandals. The state in which the Klan is strongest is Indiana. The Klan basically run Indiana, and that's not an exaggeration. The key figure there is a man called D.C. Stevenson. D.C. Stevenson is a gangster, and he's also a sexual predator. And in 1925, he is arrested and convicted for a hideous rape and a number of sexual offenses. So you have the Klan, which is presenting itself as representing Christian womanhood, being associated with things like this. So what is the Klan? It's gangsters, it's violence, it's rapists, it's all these very, very bad and evil things. Klan membership plummets, probably from 250,000 in 1924. By 1928, it's probably down to 30,000, 40,000 maximum. It has a brief revival in 1928 when the Catholic Al Smith attempts to become the first Catholic president. He's defeated. And the Klan then really pretty much goes into free fall. Most of the lodges, many of the lodges close in the 30s. It's only a few of the real diehards, like 236 in Schuylkill and 311 in Luzerne, that carry on. Now, please note, this is not, if you like, a false ending to my talk. I have quite a few more things to say, but this is an important moment to stop and take stock. In 1936, a splendid scholar by the name of Emerson Laux wrote this book, Ku Klux Klan in Pennsylvania. It's a terrific study. If you have any interest in the topic, this is a wonderful book to read after you've read my book. But this is such a good piece. And then there is a strange revival, which I do want to talk about, and which Laux himself does not get into because it happens after his time. So the Klan has faded away. It's become an extreme fringe organization in the anthracite country. But then in the mid and late 30s, it enjoys a very strange revival, and one which, as I sometimes say, I want the film rights. It's rather a dramatic story. The man in this picture is a man called Paul Winter, who is one of the most important extremists in America who you've never heard of. He is enormously important, but he's very hard to find much information about. Who is he? In the early 20s, he is the founder of the Klan in the Philadelphia area. He tries to run the Klan in Philadelphia as a violent, exploitative dictator. He runs a secret police force called, I swear, the Super Secret Service, the SSS, which is formed before Hitler's SS. By the mid-20s, he has annoyed so many people and infuriated so many people that he is told to get out of Dodge or he will be killed. He will end up in the Schuylkill River. So he returns to his home. And his home is at a place in the anthracite country called Shavertown. And over the next 20 years, from Shavertown, he becomes a national and global leader of the extremist far right, using his Klan affiliation as his base. He leads a Klan revival in the late 1930s, but it's a completely different kind of Klan. Remember, the first Klan was anti-Catholic. The new Klan of the late 1930s has a lot of people who have the old anti-Catholic ideas, but it also has people like Paul Winter who are Nazi. And when I say Nazi, I'm not just using that as, if you like, an extreme word, meaning he was really bad. I mean, he was pro-Nazi. He supported German Nazi causes. And allegedly, he made his base at Shavertown a center for Nazi and German espionage activities. We have an account of the people who passed through Shavertown in 1939 and 1940, and it's terrifying. It's a series of people who are international anti-Semitic propagandists, who are people who are actively plotting terrorist attacks on American soil, who are trying to organize desertions from the US armed forces. And we wish we knew more about Winter. And I want to tell you a short story about something that happened to me last year. I received a phone call from a gentleman who wished to report something he had found back in the late 1950s, when he had been involved in clearing out a house in a place called Trucksville, Pennsylvania. And I'd never heard of Trucksville, I apologize. When he had found all these thousands of letters which were addressed to a man who was an extremely senior Klan overlord, and they were coming from all around the world, and they were addressing this man as a serious leader of the international far right. I looked up Trucksville. It's Shavertown. It's the other half of Shavertown. There's absolutely no question that is the house of Paul Winter. I am positive that that archive does not exist anymore, but I am reasonably certain that if it did, it would cause a great deal of trouble for a great many people. I just want to skim through this very quickly as to what happens to the Klan in those later years. It's rather interesting. If you ever want to read a very interesting book, in 1930, I want to say 35, Sinclair Lewis writes a book called It Can't Happen Here, which imagines all the American far right, including the Klan, getting together to take over the United States. What would dictatorship look like in the United States? And over the next few years, the far right re-emerges from lots of different angles. What does this have to do with the anthracite country? Please bear with me. So for example, you have this man, your Father Charles Coughlin, with his very strongly anti-Semitic language from the mid-1930s onwards. He runs the paper Social Justice, and here's a word which seems a very contemporary word. The local media try to cancel Father Coughlin. That is, that they try to drive him off the media and off the airwaves. Followers, mainly Catholic, form to support Coughlin, and some of them form very extreme armed groups like the Christian Front, which plot terror attacks on the U.S. What's happening in the late 1930s? You also have German Americans forming groups like the German American Bund, who, as you see there, present themselves as patriotic Americans, but who also support Hitler. And this is obviously very concerning for internal security forces in the late 1930s. And it's at this point that the Klan revives in places like the Anthracite country. And the Klan, which is pledged to being a patriotic American group, forms these alliances with these, I use the word advisedly, extremist, terrorist groups that are connected with Nazi Germany. They're working through people like Paul Winter and Edwin Flagg and a number of these others. And by the end of the decade, the US government is very alarmed about this. Then in 1940, I want you to imagine the circumstances in 1940. In May and June, it seems as if Hitler is about to overrun the whole of Europe. Britain will be next. The Battle of Britain has not started. And meanwhile, the German Bund is holding its exercises in Long Island. It's having these parades under Nazi flags. It has another base in Pennsylvania. It has one in New Jersey. And they hold joint military exercises with the Ku Klux Klan, and mainly the Pennsylvania Ku Klux Klan. If you are not terrified about this at the time, you aren't reading the papers. Now, something very interesting then happens. The head in the state, the head in Pennsylvania of the Klan is a man called Samuel Stouch. Stouch is a very important figure. He runs the Klan in 3 states, Delaware, Jersey, and Pennsylvania. He always signs his letters as Delger Penn. And he's done a brilliant job in staging a Klan revival. He's in contact with Winter and the rest. But the Klan is very divided in his time. Particular lodges, particularly Clavens, are very divided. And you can understand what the division is. Think about it. It's this desperate time for the United States. And what some Klansmen are saying, like Winter and Stouch, is we have to fight the Jews. The Jews are our great enemy. We must fight for Hitler. And other people who you might call Klan Old Guard say, well, they don't actually use the phrase, but what they almost say is, we may be bigots, but we're not lunatics. We're American patriots. We're not going to support foreign plotting against the United States. And then in one day in 1940, something very interesting happens. Some of the dissidents within the Klan burgle Stouch's house, and they steal vast quantities of Stouch's records with amazing details on the Klan in Pennsylvania. And they ship it off in whatever the 1940 equivalent was of a U-Haul to the state police barracks in Hershey, with a note basically saying, if you want to find some traitors, here are some good names for you to start. And those records are still in the state archives, and they are a miraculous resource for anyone interested in the history of the Klan. I'll circle around to this in a moment. So how I originally got into this is actually, I think, quite interesting. Back in the early 80s, many years ago, I was working in the state archives, and I was working on the state police records, and I saw a note on a page that said Ku Klux Klan records. So I said, well, gee, that sounds interesting. I put in an order slip, and 4 men turned up with little carts with many, many boxes on, saying, how many of these do you want at any given time? And I realized, oh, brother, this is a huge collection. Now, normally, when you have records with embarrassing or sensitive material, you weed them first. You take out the really embarrassing stuff. You take out the names. You take out the places where bodies are buried. These records were released to the archives without weeding. We have the names of hundreds and thousands of Klan members. We have their addresses, we have their heights, we have their eye color, we have the churches they attended, we know the other organizations they belong to. If you look at any community, you can form an astonishingly detailed account of the Klan in that particular community. It's all very well saying there are, I don't know, 500 members in this particular lodge. But in many places, you can track them down in extreme detail. If you go, for example, if you go to Google and you write Pennsylvania State Archives, Ku Klux Klan records, that will take you to a wonderful site, which will take you to so many of these records. I, of course, hate this because, like many old-time archivists, I had to go and dig these things up myself and get my hands dirty. Now you can do it all from the comfort of your own office. I'll just give you one example. In 1924, in Pennsylvania, the Klan decided it needed people to fight in the streets against Catholics. They formed a new order called the Cavaliers, Cavaliers with a K, Cavaliers, and they took applications. And we have the application forms of everyone who tried to join the street fighting order for about, what is it, a dozen or 14 counties. And in the anthracite area, we have Carbon County. You can go to Carbon County resources and you can find, okay, here's this man, this is his job, this is his eye color, this is his height and weight, this is who he was. You can network these people and you get a sensational idea of a part of anthracite culture and heritage, and in many ways is so surprising and so counterintuitive. I was going to include a couple of illustrations of these, but I decided, I did not want to cause embarrassment to people whose descendants might watch. If there was a file here for, let me take Bob Jenkins, perhaps I would not want that known. I'd be happy to look at it myself, but no, I don't want to use this. So let me just say very quickly, I've talked about the Klan up until 1940. In Pennsylvania, there's that crisis, and that really finishes them off in the state. They stage a revival in the 50s and 60s, and there have been subsequent attempts to bring the Klan back in different ways. But when the Klan comes back, the numerical setup is just so absolutely different from anything that you had back in the 20s and 30s. In the 20s and 30s, you had 250,000 in 1924. Maybe you had 40,000 at the end of the decade. At the height in the 50s and 60s, what did you have? Maybe a few hundred, perhaps. I would add one thing, which is the ideology of the Klan changed. It merged into a larger broad right, inspired by some far right manuals. Famous ones, the Turner Diaries, which is a great manual for teaching you how to overthrow the United States. And you also have a book like Hunter, which is probably the most important manual of the far right, although it's not widely known, which is the manual for recommending the virtues of terrorist actions by lone assassins, by carrying out lone terrorist attacks, by shooting up synagogues, for example. This is a book that I still don't think American law enforcement has entirely figured out, but it is significant. Ku Klux Klan in Pennsylvania is a very well-studied topic now. There's an excellent book, as I say, Emerson Lokes is very good from 1936. You have this book on Western Pennsylvania by John Craig, absolutely fine book. I like to think that I made some contributions with my own work, but there is still so much to find out. Back in the day, people like myself were trying to make a new contribution by looking at states. Now you can go to regions. There is a great book to be written on the anthracite region. There's a great book to be written on counties, and there's a great book to be written on individual towns. The amount of material is potentially overwhelming. I cannot stress it enough. So I'm speaking about topics which perhaps Monsignor Curran would find difficult and upsetting, but I like to think that I am speaking in the tradition of somebody who believes in the quest for knowledge and honest history. And with that, I will draw to a close, and I will say thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Philip. That was a really marvelous and fascinating presentation. Encourage questions to come in. They're coming in right now, and I already have a pretty good list. Let me start off. There's a question about another potential target, I guess, of Klan activity. The question is, to what extent was the Ku Klux Klan anti-union in the region?
That is an excellent question, and they are not particularly active in that way. It's the ethnic side that that really takes the lead. So many of the people they are drawing on are themselves union people, so they have to be fairly balanced on this. When you get into the 30s, there's a very different setup. They're very anti-CIO, for example, because they just see the CIO as a straight communist front. In the 20s, this is a delicate line that they have to be very careful about walking. Not so much.
Okay, it's another interesting question. Did the Klan become involved with institutions in any way? And the questioner uses the example of law enforcement.
Yeah, sure. The Klan are regarded as being a very positive force. They work with a lot of law enforcement units. They try and cultivate excellent relationships, for instance, with churches. They will stage spontaneous marches into Protestant churches to greet the clergyman, to congratulate him, to hand over a Klan Bible, to thank him, and then fade into the sunset. Usually, these efforts are welcomed. Local police units are not particularly anti-Klan. They know these are, mainstream citizens. This is not about the Klan, but there's one quote I always liked in Philadelphia in the 20s when there was a lot of sort of Italian fascist activity, and the quote is, there was one bombing and the police said, we have never really noticed a problem with anti-fascism in Philadelphia before. In other words, fascism is not a problem. Anti-fascism is a problem we might have to deal with. So they've got very good relationships with police. You'll certainly find police and local police in the Klan. Yeah, absolutely. They are quite active in elections also, nothing like in Indiana, where it's very hard to get elected without a Klan endorsement. They never even bother with that. Hello, hello.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to put this question a couple of ways. Who didn't need to be native born to qualify as an American and therefore be a potential Klansman? Maybe put somewhat differently, what was it about the population of Pennsylvania that made that allowed for the Klan to have this kind of growth in the 1920s?
Yeah, that's a question that I tried to explore at some length in my Hoods and Shirts book. One thing that is very concerning to them is that you have a large and fairly diverse Protestant population, but particularly from the end of the 19th century, you have a very large infusion of immigrant Catholics, not just the Irish, but you have the Poles and the Italians and the Slovaks. With their often with their social networks and their political networks and their churches. And that is terrifying because people see this very rapid ethnic and religious change. Old stock Protestants, whether they're German or Scotch Irish or Welsh, believe that they are losing their country. It's a very traditional anti-immigrant rhetoric. And you have people like Paul Winter, who developed this into an extensive body of conspiracy theory, not just that the Catholics are coming, but the Catholics are coming and they are planning an armed military coup against the United States. Illustrations of this, they look at, for instance, new churches being built in Philadelphia, in Altoona, for example, and they'll say, these are not just churches, these are not just cathedrals, these are fortresses that are intended to stockpile weapons so that when the Catholics strike, they'll be rounding up Protestants in the streets and killing them. I don't care how mad that sounds. That is a very convincing rhetoric at the time. So I think one of the big reasons for the appeal of the Klan is the speed of change. And I would say, think about it, just during the 20th century. Imagine if you looked at a lot of smaller Pennsylvania towns in 1900 and then saw how they had developed by the early 20s, how ethnicity had changed, how the Catholic presence had become more marked. Changes that we look at today and think, this is wonderful, this is this great diversity. But it is very easy for people like Winter to reach remarkably intelligent, ordinary people and say, we are losing our country. We've begun the climb back. We've got prohibition now. This is a great symbol. We can begin to reconstruct society. You're a Christian. You know that there is a great Protestant revival going, and its anthem is the old rugged cross. That's the anthem of the Klan also. So they hold up this mission, this message of hope and rescue. I'm sorry, what's the name of the Wilkes-Barre Klavan? It's the Rescue Klavan. It's an image of national salvation from crisis. And that's probably a long and meandering answer, but I think it touches on a couple of main points. It's the speed of change. It's the speed of life.
These are great answers. Your response could lead to two questions here. I guess I'll put them both out. Interesting and international comparison. Do you see any similarities between the contemporary development of fascist movements in Europe, in Italy and Germany and elsewhere. And we have a question that asks you to consider whether there is a history of the anti-Catholic tradition maybe coming over from Ireland.
Sure. Yeah. Well, two things. If you had a movement like the Klan in any European country in the same time, in 1920, 1922, you would immediately call it fascist. It fits, it ticks every box. It ticks every category. It is more religious than some, but as religious as others. It fits precisely. And I would also say that when you get into the 1930s, especially the late 1930s, the way the Klan moves towards that much more anti-Semitic and Nazi-affiliated style, it looks a lot like pro-Nazi movements in European countries, in Hungary, in Romania. It is remarkable to me that so many American historians talk about the Klan except as part of this tendency to a fascist movement. The Scotch-Irish thing is so important. I'm using the phrase here. The phrase I would always use in Great Britain is Ulster, Ulster Presbyterian, Ulster Protestant, in this country commonly known as Scotch-Irish. So important in Pennsylvania history, so important in the Masonic tradition. Don't forget, the key of Ulster Protestant organization is the Orange Lodges, okay? And they celebrate the victory of King William back in 1690. There's a very large Orange Lodge tradition in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh. When you have the glorious 12th, the victory of this great battle in 1690, there are huge orange parades in Philadelphia right through the 1920s and 1930s. And we often forget that. Very, very strong in Canadian cities also. Orange Lodges represent a global movement with the British Empire, but they're also very strong in the United States. But as I say, so much of that then gets carried over into Masons. By the way, I just mentioned one thing I sort of find quite interesting there. In the late 1920s, affairs in Mexico are deeply divisive in the United States. Mexico becomes radically, violently anti-Catholic, and many American Catholics want the United States to invade. And the anti-war opposition is led by America's radical Protestants and anti-Catholics, above all the Ku Klux Klan. And when you read about this, you have this sort of very strange double take, which is you're reading about this noble band of liberal anti-imperialists who want to keep America out of war, and they're the, oh my Lord, it's the Ku Klux Klan. But that religious issue just runs through the teens, 20s, 30s. It is so divisive in many places. It leaves a religious heritage in later years by various state laws prohibiting state assistance to Catholic schools. I see, you often see, Masonic elements there, and our old friends, the Orange Lodges, are out. So in a sense, if I am Paul Winter and I'm trying to recruit somebody for the Klan, I have to talk about this Catholic menace, and I don't have to tell them much. They're 90% convinced already. I just have to get them to put on a hood.
We have a question. I'll preface the question, and we have Bob Walensky with us, and he's written a lot on the mafia, let me say, organized crime. And we have a question from our audience. Did you find any conflict with the Klan and the mafia? I assume organized crime in general.
I just wish to say I have to go and write a film script because that is just such a wonderful topic. No, I did not. And for this reason, if I was doing this talk on Philadelphia, I would be talking about the anti-Catholic element, certainly, but I would mainly probably be talking much more about black and white issues, the defense of property lines against African Americans buying property in those areas and so on. Very much issues that you think of in the 60s and 70s. The mafia stuff really does not show up particularly. Interestingly, the Klan is very happy to parade in the sections where it is strong. I don't think they would. They try and parade in, South Philadelphia, for example, or Kensington. Or so Bob may know other stuff here, but I am not aware of that. But I am casting the film as we speak on the mafia meets the Ku Klux Klan.
I think we have about 8 more minutes. Some of these questions are more specific than others. One questioner praises you and says he's going to buy your book, wants to know if you know whether or not there were a lot of Klansmen in Klanspeople in Chickasha. Question, how are you so certain that the Paul Winter archive is really lost? And then what became of the far right in the anthracite region? Did it just disappear? Did it perhaps take on a different form?
I cannot answer the Chickasha one because I don't have my notes in front of me, but I'm positive it would be possible to scare that up. That Winter archive, as I said, I don't want to embarrass the gentleman by giving his name here, but I really heard no suggestion that might survive. I would give my right arm for something like that. There are a number of things that change. World War II is extremely influential in eroding older divisions, and especially the Protestant Catholic division. Military service for 4 years in World War II, and then the sustained draft thereafter does a very important job in reducing tensions between Protestants and Catholics. Of course, they don't fade entirely; they resurface somewhat in 1960. But it's just nothing like the same issue. Obviously, we can point to any number of incidents of racism and racial hatred and racial violence, right up to very modern times. But in terms of organized groupings, organized movements, they really don't come back after World War II. Sometimes you'll see, for example, there was a famous study that was much bounced around from the 1990s onwards, and people would say, Pennsylvania has got these all these hate groups, and they would say they've got like 52 hate groups or whatever. And you actually look at the evidence, and the evidence for hate groups of any size is actually that you're dealing with tiny, tiny groups. You could put the membership of all those groups together as they existed, say, at the start of the century, and they'd be less than one decent sized Klavan that would have existed in the 1920s. You are talking about at most a few hundred activists. Now, one thing I'm not going to get into here, because this is a whole other story and you have to bring me back for another evening, is how people get converted to individual extremist views on the internet. They don't formally join movements, but they get radicalized. And you look at somebody like the monster who attacked the synagogue in Pittsburgh. not necessarily part of an organized movement where you go along to a hall and talk to other people. It's all online. So that's a different thing. So obviously the inheritance does continue. But if you've looked at the Klan as it existed in the 20s, or these far right networks as in the late 1930s, no one else comes close.
Well, on the thought of inviting you here for another evening, I think it would be an appropriate time to begin to bring things to a conclusion. I want to thank you once again, and on behalf of our campus, the McGowan Center, the Anthracite Heritage Foundation. It was a very fascinating presentation. The only thing that might have been better is to have you here in person, although it's getting bitterly cold out. The warm office feels pretty good right now. So a big round of virtual applause. And I'm also going to go get your book. Great research, great presentation. Let me turn it over. I think maybe Bob will want to say something and maybe remind us of what's coming up for Anthracite Heritage Month. Thank you once more.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Bernard, for hosting this, and Father Tom Looney for introducing us. Philip, outstanding presentation. I'm so glad that it has been recorded. I'm sure it'll be available at the website of the Ethics Institute or some other such place. We'll learn about this. But a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge that I think has in many ways startled the audience, as some of us thought it might. But it's our history. It's not that long ago. It's some of these patterns, are still with us. Cultures change slowly, but they do change. And if you believe Martin Luther King, the arc is long, but it bends toward justice. So I think that's another consideration. So with that, I just want to thank you. And I don't know if Bernard wants to make a final comment, but thanks to everyone. It's been a really wonderful and enlightening Curran lecture in January 2022.
Thanks so much. That was superb. Thanks everybody for joining us. Philip, thank you. Thank you again, Bob. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Take care.